Please welcome back to the stage, Arielle Rassel.
Hi, me again. So we talked this morning, right, about the importance of asking the right questions and building a strong company culture and building a culture of coaching. We talked about employee empowerment and some of those other factors. One of the other really important things I want to talk to you about now is psychological safety, hence the title of our talk, Better Safe Than Sorry. The stats don't lie. Cultures where employees feel safe and empowered are statistically 30% more productive. 30%. Wouldn't you like to see that improvement in your bottom line? That's a big deal. So what does psychological safety actually mean? Before you accuse me of being yet another millennial who needs her safe space, I'm not saying that psychological safety means being nice. Honestly, that's not it at all. It's about candor. It's about being able to be honest, give candid feedback, call out toxic behavior when you see it, hold each other accountable, ask the difficult questions, and not immediately fear retribution for that. Safe spaces are important for everyone. It's not just a buzzword for millennials and Gen Z. So what makes an organization feel psychologically safe? Can I ask challenging questions of leadership without feeling like my job's going to be on the line? Can I innovate and take creative risks without fearing that if I fail, I'll be first out the door in the next round of layoffs or sooner? Failure is important to an organization. I love the abbreviation that fail equals first attempt in learning. We need room to fail. Is management setting impossible goals and deadlines and unwilling to listen to employee feedback? That's a really great way to make your employees feel not just unsafe, but actually threatened. It's easy to say psychological safety is just a buzzword, but it absolutely has an effect on a company's bottom line. If a company's culture doesn't feel safe, employees won't speak up. They'll just leave. Turnover skyrockets, and you might not know why. If you don't bother with an exit interview, or even if you do, if they don't feel safe to tell you that that's why they're leaving, they won't. They'll just leave. High turnover is bad for projects. You lose time on hiring and training. You lose continuity in your teams. What client wants 3 project managers in a row on a project, right? I say that as someone who's done it. Hiring a new employee costs a lot of money. Stats say it costs roughly half of an employee's annual salary to train and hire them, not to mention the time you lose on a project from the learning curve. Products and projects may fail because no one felt safe to raise those potential flags along the way that could have been mitigated in the process if they had. The worst thing is that ethics can slip. Shortcuts get taken, standards get bypassed, you trying to meet unrealistic or aggressive goals. Again, it's just good business sense to make sure your employees feel safe. We want to look good to our peers, we want to look good to our managers. It's human nature. And that means we may not speak up or speak out or otherwise put ourselves at risk of perceived danger. But in a psychologically safe environment, none of those behaviors actually feel dangerous. Let's look at a case where a lack of psychological safety led to catastrophic results. Wells Fargo, right? A lot of you know this story. Aggressive sales goals were set by upper management with no boots on the ground to give feedback. Stretch goals, closed ears, recipe for disaster. Employees felt like if they didn't meet their goals, they'd be fired. So ethics slipped. Fake accounts were created, multiple accounts were created in people's names without them realizing it. They lied to their teams and their clients and told them if you buy product A, you have to buy product B, when that wasn't necessarily true. Again, we know how this story plays out, right? It was in the news everywhere. It's terrible. They're still rebuilding their reputation years later. Conversely, let's look at a success of psychological safety. Pixar, overall, has had hit after hit after hit after hit, critically acclaimed and well-received at the box office. That doesn't happen for most studios. So you have to look at why is that. Within the company, there are early screenings of their films. At each of these early screenings, there is a clear expectation that this is the first pass. It's not going to be great, right? There's room to improve, there's room to fail. And because of that, critical feedback is not only accepted, it's expected. Or look at Google with Project Aristotle. They went on a quest to find out what makes their teams successful. Was it the best education? Was it access to leadership? Was it budgets? Above all, what made teams function best, they found, was psychological safety. When employees feel safe, they excel. In a case study called Psychological Safety and Learned Behavior in Work Teams, Amy Edmondson researched what causes medical mistakes to be made in a hospital. Mistakes that could prove not only costly, but fatal. Wanting to know if better teams made fewer mistakes, she actually found the opposite. The most cohesive teams made the most mistakes. Now, that seems strange until you think about, is it actually that they felt safer to report those mistakes? That the other teams were making the same amount of errors, but they were sliding under the radar because they didn't feel safe to bring it up and change that behavior. In working with the leadership of one of the teams, she observed the following. The manager asked her team in a weekly meeting, is everything as safe as you would like it to be? And the answers poured in. No, everything was not. Her office was flooded with her team presenting her ways that the hospital could have been safer for its patients and its staff. And the phrasing of that question is key. Is everything as safe as you want it to be? It's not, have you seen mistakes made, or how did you screw up, or how did your team screw up? It's, is everything as safe as you want it to be? Her team became measurably safer and more effective as a result. So what does this look like to us? We're not running hospitals, but we are often dealing with the very, very large reality of guest safety. So that means being able to ask questions in meetings like, is this really the right choice for our guest? Or is this really accessible, or are we just doing the bare minimum to meet code? Beyond that, it means not giving someone side-eye in meetings for not being the right person or the right gender or the right race or the right age to make that comment. It, as was referenced earlier, is leaning into that discomfort. Psychological safety means being an ally. It's a team effort. This is not just up to management. This is up to every single person in this room to contribute to a safe environment. Another reason this is so important is this carries beyond our workplace into our personal lives. Simon Sinek in Leaders Eat Last references research that says employees who are unhappy or stressed out at work have higher levels of depression and anxiety at or above those who are unemployed. Their bad job, right, is worse than if they didn't have one at all, which is crazy. So our toxic workplaces are literally making us sick. Creating a safer workspace, we can reduce our team's stress and anxiety levels, making for a team that is literally happier and healthier, and in turn, more invested in their work. From a management perspective, a lot of this is easier said than done. Leading from a place of authority or even fear is easy. Answering for your questions, you don't have to explain your decisions, right? It's great, you go, you shut your door, not your problem. Or you stick your head in the sand and say, our numbers are good, we're fine. But if your culture's flawed, your people are gonna leave, and your numbers aren't gonna stay good for much longer. Creating a culture of psychological safety takes courage and compassion. It takes leading by example. It's as simple as leadership starting conversations with, here's a mistake I made, and giving that example. It requires being proactive. Ask questions, invite participation, encourage engagement, and then respond appropriately. Even if you explain to your employees that it's safe for them to speak up, they don't have to fear retribution, it's really hard for a lot of us to get past that hurdle, right? It's a trained behavior to be afraid of consequence. So we find ourselves back to topic number one, right, of asking the right questions. It's your metaphorical, is everything as safe as you'd like it to be? Respond appreciatively when they ask those questions. Inherently, we don't like bad news. But if you bite someone's head off the first time they give it to you, or immediately shoot them down, all that safety you've worked so hard to build just went out the window. So, again, 3 steps: ask, engage, respond. Getting it right is more important than being right. On diversity, psychological safety plays in a lot too. It goes really deep into your culture about having a sense of belonging. The Me Too movement was born of women not feeling psychologically safe at work. So someone in your org may feel safer than others, and it's important to take those steps to make sure everyone feels safe to bring their fullest self to work. It's easy to dismiss our inherent bias in that someone may feel safer, right, because they look like you, or they think like you, or they come from the same socioeconomic background as you. So remember to recognize that bias and think about, is this really the safest place for everyone in my organization? And if it's not, how do I fix it? These conversations, they take so much vulnerability. And that's something we struggle with. As a species, we don't like to be vulnerable. It feels unsafe. We see it as a weakness, but that's just not true. To be vulnerable is to be so, so very brave. As Brené Brown asks in Dare to Lead, can you give me a single example of great courage that didn't also take great vulnerability? We'll talk more about vulnerability tomorrow, but for now I have a call to action for you. I have some friends in the audience who've passed out note cards to hopefully all of you, or at least most of you. So, action item that will make more sense because we'll revisit it tomorrow. Sometime between now and the end of the next break, take a minute to think on, what does vulnerability mean to you? Just a couple words. Maybe it's what you thought vulnerability was, or what it was modeled as growing up, or what it means to you in your workplace now. Just a sentence, a couple words. It's totally anonymous. There's a box at the registration desk outside. Drop that card in there before the end of the day, and we'll talk more about those results and what they mean for your organizations tomorrow. Until then, see ya.